Hi, I'm Allie. Join me in some very simple wire stackable gemstone bangle bracelets. You can do these in a ton of variety, and there's a ton of different gauges and sizes that you can use. So stay tuned the whole way till the end because the clasp is part of the intro wire. As always, if you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the description to shop with us online. So for today's wire wrapped pebble bracelet, what we are going to be using is some 18 gauge wire, and you can use anywhere from 24 down to 28 gauge wire. Obviously, the thinner the coils, the thinner the wire, so it's going to affect a little bit the look of it, and you're going to get a little bit more of a dainty look or a little bit more of a solid thick look if you start to go up and use a thicker gauge. The reason that I'm limiting myself to 18 gauge in my base wire, which my bangle is going to be made with, is because that is going to be the determining factor for fitting my beads onto my wire. You'll notice I have 8 seed beads here, as well as some of my pebble beads. So the pebble beads here, and these make great stackable bracelets. I'm going to be using the labradorite in the pebbles, and we're going to make this so it stacks right on top of the next one. I have some amethyst then to make my next bracelet. You can do this with turquoise. Any of the pebbles give a great organic look. I'm going to begin with a 10-inch piece of my 18 gauge wire. I have next to me my wire cutters, my chain nose or needle nose pliers, and a round nose plier. The first thing I'm going to do is make my round loop, and I'm keeping all of my bracelets here with a nice simple hook and eye, all created one as the piece. If you have a larger wrist, you may want to start out with 12 to 14 inches of wire. The first thing I'm going to do is leave myself about 1 inch of wire, and I'm going to take my plier and turn the 18 gauge wire to the side. Go in then with your round nose plier. I'm going towards the back and I'm making a loop, taking my wire around the round nose plier, and I'm going to make that into that little loop. I want this loop to be big enough that it's going to be easy to take on and off. So if you want to, you can kind of stretch it and push it down on those round nose pliers to do so. From here, go ahead and hold that loop that you just made, and we're going to coil the extra wire around the base of that piece. I don't want to poke myself, so I'm going to go in here now and trim this down with my wire cutters, covering with my hand so that piece of wire does not fling off and hit the cat. So from in here, I'm going to go in with my plier and just kind of pinch down that end a little bit. I'm going to do a very similar design that I did with my Amazonite here when it comes to my next bracelet, utilizing some 8 Miyuki seed beads. Now, one thing to notice when you're using seed beads or if you're using round beads is that not all of them will fit on that 18 gauge wire. If you have one that won't fit on the wire, if you're using seed beads, try another one because chances are you'll get a couple that'll fit on. If you have trouble putting something on the wire, spin it rather than push it on. Glass, gemstone, doesn't matter. Try that spin method because if you push it on, chances are you are going to break your bead. I'm going to go ahead and cut open my strand here of my labradorite and then pick out exactly which ones I want to use for my bracelet. Onto my 18 gauge wire, I've gone ahead and I've put approximately 10 to 12 beads, depending on your size of your bead, that are spaced out by 1/8 seed bead. Now, obviously, I'm going to put some spacing in here with some wire, but I want to show it right next to one another in case you don't want to put any spacing and you just want that bangle. So the beads don't fall off the end. I'm just going to take my plier and just turn over that wire just the tiniest little bit to kind of make that shepherd's hook so that way my beads don't fall off the end. From here, I'm going to separate out my beads a little bit and give myself some room. I'm going to keep that first seed bead down next to the start of the project. It's good and easy to hold on to when you're going in and starting. I have some scrap wire here, so I'm using some 28 gauge wire to coil and wrap. If you're using 24 gauge, about 2.5 feet will do it for you. You can also, like I said, do less coils, more coils, up to you. And if you need to stop coils and restart, you can totally do that with wire very easily also. So I'm going to go in with my 28 gauge wire and I'm going to intersect my 18 gauge wire, meaning my wire is going to be sitting so that it's perpendicular to the thicker wire behind. I'm going to, moving those beads out of the way a little bit, I'm going to hold the wire over top of the thicker wire and start coiling and start wrapping. Now I'm going to change a view right now so you can see what this looks like from your perspective. You're going to stand a little bit, usually with it up a little bit close to your face. I'm going to go in and hold this, and I'm going to start with my hand taking the wire around the piece. Now you need to decide how many wraps you want to do and what you want the look of. It's spaced out. I'm going to show it again now from the other angle, showing you what I'm doing with the end. I'm going back and I'm just coiling the end of this nice thin wire. I'm going to push it down next to where it needs to go. And if the tail is still sticking up, you can go in and just kind of pinch that down. Now, obviously, like I said, this is 28 gauge wire. I'm just using this because I did a bunch of live streaming today with some 28 gauge wire, and it's sitting here. You can use anything from 28 down to 22 to do the coils. Once I have it the distance that I want to away from the gold bead, I'm going to push my first bead down into place, take the wire over top of the bead, and then make sure that the wire is sitting right after that bead. So you see how I'm kind of pulling it back toward the bead. And then I'm going to do my coils and wraps, taking it around the piece here, pushing it down close the way that I want it to be, moving my bead in place when I want it to sit, wrapping over top of the bead. Once again, once you're done with that over top of the bead, kind of lock it in place by pushing that wire against the bead, and then once again, start wrapping. The advantage to putting those beads all on right away is that you can use those beads as kind of an anchor to push your wire against. Lining them up, moving them down, taking the wire over top of the gemstone, and then once again, starting that coil on the opposite side. With a thin gauge like 28 gauge, I don't have to worry too much about getting those coils really nice and tightly close together because I can do that with the beads and using them again as pressure against it. If you have a thicker wire that you're working with, 22, 24 gauge, you're going to notice as you're doing it that coiling that you're going in and doing, you want it to look nice. You'll still be able to use the beads as kind of a pressure point to push against the wire as you wrap and coil again over top of the beads and then coil down between. You can see how quickly this bracelet will turn out as you, again, already have the beads on there and continue wrapping in that same coiling form. Adding a bead, moving it down, pushing that against, and I'm just going to continue wrapping along the bracelet, holding those beads in place. So if you are using pieces of wire or you get to a point that you realize that you didn't cut enough, you may need to end your wire and start over and start again. So how is that done? What I'm going to do is I have about 2 or 3 wraps right there after my gemstone, and I'm going to cut that wire and once again push that wire down into place. After doing so, I'm going to go in with my new piece of wire, start just like we did. So I'm starting again prior to my bead because I want to make that a consistent look. I have my 2 wraps that I've done. You'll notice I have that scrap of wire that I grabbed and held onto, or the starter wire. I'm going to cut that down, push those 2 wires next to one another, get my next 2 beads in place, and then I'll go back and I'll cut those ends down and make sure you can't see where one ends and where another one begins. Going on here then, I'm getting ready to finish my piece. This is quite possibly going to be one of the fastest bracelets you make up. This is why I like to call them stackable bangles, is because it's a very quick process. They look great stacked on top of one another, and these pebbles that we just got in are to die for and look great with the design. Once you get to the end of your bracelet design, and you can see about how big you want it to be, what you need the length to be, it depends on your wrist, you're going to notice as I was wrapping, I was bending into that oval form. When I'm done with my last bead, what I am going to do is cut the wire off prior to that seed bead. I'm doing this so that way it matches the opposite end exactly. From here, I'm going to go right after the bead, take my plier, and I'm going to turn my wire so that it's at 90 degrees. Your eye pin on the other side, you want it to be facing up and down. So when you're looking at the bracelet, you want to be able to see that open loop. On this side here, I'm going to grab my Sharpie marker sitting near me, just a thick Sharpie, and I'm bending the wire over the top of the Sharpie marker to get a nice, simple loop. From here, I'm going to cut the wire down. You notice I had about an extra ½ inch. And I'm going to bend up the end of that wire, just using my chain nose pliers, and then pinching it down and going in and kind of creating that teardrop shape. I want it to be able to easily go through here, and then I'll stretch it out and design it and see kind of the fit that I need it to be. The more that you wear it, the more that it'll start to harden, and that will take its shape to it and keep that shape. You can get very creative at the end if you want to and make squiggles and lines and all of that. But now I have two bracelets that look great, have semi the same pattern. You can see the difference between the 24 gauge and the 28 gauge, but two gemstones look great together, and I can wear them as a bangle. You can also, if you want to, make them that they just have loops on the end, and they can hook into another one of the bangles. Loops on this side, loop on this side, and sit together as well too. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a beautiful amethyst one as well, and keep going with a bunch of the other gemstones, making these simple wire wrapped stackable bangles. Thanks so much for joining me in creating these fun wire bangle bracelets. So easy, so fun, and really a great use of beads and wire. Remember, if you make any modifications, go ahead and comment below. That helps out other viewers like you that may want to make some modifications. If you do want to check out any of these gemstone pebbles or the Potomax Wire, go ahead and look below the video in the description to shop with us online. As always, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next inspirational video.